but to stay present. And then God has this funny sense of humor. Moved to my ex-boyfriend, who was also on the path to radicalization. Our first disagreement was on slavery. Didn't know that would be a conversation with a partner. That relationship that lasted 9 months taught me something else. Because I knew I wasn't ready to leave when I started to see how extreme some of the views were. And so that taught me how to separate the humanity from the man, from the views of the man, how to love the humanity of the man, and get curious about the views. Where do they come from? How do they get there? How are they impacting his life? And so what I've learned from these two experiences is transformation doesn't begin with correction or critique, but it begins with invitation to curiosity, to story, and to love. So now I'll go a little bit to my story. So several years ago, I hit a wall. I was a consultant on Wall Street. I was overseeing 150 consultants worldwide. And I was tired of being asked to create miracles in 2-hour intervals. Some of y'all know what I mean. So on my 40th birthday, I walked into my CEO's office and I said, I lost my heart and my soul in this job and I quit. That was my birthday present. Not long after this opportunity, Eileen Fisher came along. And so Eileen Fisher, for those of you that don't know, but your wives probably do, is a high-end fashion company that makes cardigan sweaters for $500. But it was a company that was also one of the most progressive companies probably in America. We meditated at the beginning of every meeting. They sent me to an artist commune in Canada for 5 months to learn how to incorporate the arts into creative facilitation. But it was this moment that kind of changed the course of my life. So I went on an 8-month interview to get this job, to see if I was a culture fit. 8 months. My 2 bosses sat me down when I got the job. And they said, so Sean, you have proven yourself in the interview. We now want you to stop proving yourself and learn how to be who you actually are. When you interviewed with us, you showed us your heart and you showed us your polish. We hired you for your heart and we want to see less of your polish. We don't care how many credentials you have. And so that's pretty much what was, one, an invitation, and more importantly, permission. Permission to go on my journey. And what I noticed was I wasn't the only man. Now, Eileen Fisher was 1,200 employees, 200 of them were men, 83% women. And men were being transformed through this culture. I would say, yo, I'm changing. You changing? They're like, yeah, I'm changing. My wife said, I always started with my wife. My wife said, I'm more patient. I listen differently. I'm more curious. I stopped needing to be right all the time. I was more comfortable in the gray. I had more emotional capacity. I was tapping into creativity differently. I was solving problems in new ways. And every guy said, and I'm more comfortable in my own skin. I said, you know what, we got to bottle this up, take it out in the world. So, and as I said, they sent me to an artist commune. That's where I got the call to work with men. Now, mind you, I left Wall Street to never have to work with men again. So, this is a spiritual calling. This is way beyond my pay grade. But when I really thought about it, and this is how my mind works, if oppressive systems are crumbling around us, they need to be reimagined from deeper consciousness and collective wisdom, not rebuilt on outdated models. Right? And so I knew that work wasn't just psychological, but it was spiritual. It's the soul healing work that men need. So what does one do? I went to seminary. So I didn't go to seminary because I was like some spiritual religious person. I just knew that I had to do my spiritual deep work to be able to hold men in their spiritual depths. So I went to seminary, became an interfaith minister. So my orientation as an interfaith minister, the teachings of Christ, shamanic practice, and Sufi wisdom. That's how I kind of blended. And really looking at it as a way of saying, how do we help men learn to love in a new way? And that's really at the essence. And essentially, when I go into these systems, I just call myself a CSO, a covert spiritual operative. Bringing love, compassion, and deeper humanity into the places that need it the most. So I want to talk a little bit about this warrior concept. I have mixed views on it, I know. Some love it, some hate it, some don't agree with it. But what is it? And I think there's an opportunity for us to frame it or reframe it. It's not about being the destroyer. It's about being the protector of what's sacred, being the defender of what's sacred. As Stephen Pressfield wrote, the warrior fights not because he hates what's in front of him, but because he loves what's behind him. Awakening the warrior isn't about picking up a weapon. It's about picking up responsibility. Not domination, but devotion. Not control, but presence. When we fear the warrior, we exile. When we glorify him, we lose ourselves in him. When we initiate him, aligning strength with heart, that's when transformation happens. Across Wall Street, policing, government, veterans, I meet men who have done everything right and still feel empty or feel alone. It's not because they're weak, but because often they're disconnected from their hearts. Men aren't dangerous because they're powerful. They become dangerous when they are disconnected from their power, from belonging, from purpose and love. The wound is not the enemy. The wound is the teacher. Bringing compassion to the wound and underlying pain. Then the underlying pain transforms into purpose. So in my counter-extremism work and in teaching men masculinity and extremism at American University, I've learned a few things. Men don't move towards extremism because of hate. They move towards extremism because of pain. Now, I want you to imagine a stew. I call it the stew of radicalization. And in this stew, we have a few ingredients. Faulty teachings, outdated models, toxic conditioning. Notice I didn't say toxic masculinity, I said toxic conditioning. Because we're conditioned to a lot of things. Deep-seated fear, shame, untouched grief, unresolved grievance, that point when a man loses hope, and I think significantly, when men feel like they don't matter. And beneath that, another layer, we start putting the seasons in, existential loss of identity, isolation and loneliness, algorithms that know how to activate and amplify our grievance, echo chambers masquerading as belonging, and a sense of powerlessness, where men seek control, seek more certainty, and can have a more narrow view of how the world works. So extremism isn't about ideology. It's often about belonging. A few years ago, I was in a meeting with Senate staffers on the Judiciary Committee after the Uvalde shooting. So about a week after, they made time for our team to come and speak. We met with the staffers for 30 minutes. Our conversation revolved around men's mental health Mass shootings, gun violence, police suicides, veteran suicides. It's like, whoa. It's like an avalanche of hopelessness. And from that moment, I stopped saying I meet men where they are. One, because I think it can be condescending. Because who am I? You know? But I know many men, and many of the men I'm talking about are suffering. Sometimes explicitly, sometimes implicitly, sometimes loudly, sometimes quietly. But many are suffering. And so I say I meet men in their suffering. I listen for their yearning. And I offer hope in the midst of both. And that is where I believe sacred masculine lives. Not in perfection, but in presence, in grounded presence. So here's what I've learned. A few lessons from this work. One, I always ask anyone who works with men, do you love men or do you have contempt for men? Are you trying to fix them or do you want to heal them? Because if you feel contempt, you'll never reach men. So let's not fix men. Let's invite them into the journeys of their own healing. Let's plant seeds and let's let go of what does a transformation look like? People ask me all the time, Sean, what does transformation look like? I'm like, do you realize how long this guy has been living with this conditioning, this worldview? And then the generations that have been applied upon him. Let's go for the actual wins. And for me, usually starts with, the death grip handshake. When I get the death grip handshake, because they're like, who is this guy? Is he a threat? What's he going to tell me? Is he going to tell me I'm wrong? And then I get the hug at the end. And then I watch the melt in the middle. And that melt is where they go from defensive and masked to letting go to, oh, this guy's not wronging me. He's not flinching when I tell him what I think. He's not correcting me. Maybe he's not a threat. Maybe I can actually open up a little bit. And he starts to open up a little bit and a little bit more. And then he starts going to that place of vulnerability, and we watch the melt. Him coming into his own humanity. This work, I was told when I first started this work by a professor at UC Merced. There's one thing, Sean, you can never do working with men. Never, ever sound like a gender studies professor. I have taken that to heart. And at the same time, I think this work is about not emasculating men and not victimizing men, but really seeing men as men. I remember I was doing a pilot. I was doing a prototype of a men's circle at George Mason University with a bunch of college students. They were grad students in a master's in organization development program. So we did a men's circle. We did 6 guys and then the rest women. So one of the guys raises his hand. He says, yo, Sean, this is not a men's circle. I said, why not? I said, because women are watching. I said, okay, let's just dig in. What happens when women are in the mix? We can't be real. We can't be honest. We can't talk about what we need to talk about. And we're afraid of being offensive, so we don't say anything. And the guys in the group nodded their heads. At the end, someone else raised their hand and said, it's clear you work with cops and military. I'm like, why do you say that? So because you actually treated us like men, and you acted like a man and treated us like men. That never happens in our field. We always feel like we have to be neutered to be successful at our work. This is what I mean when we talk about in organizations, there's a lot of the quiet conversation, the quiet crisis for men who don't really have the voice of what's real and authentic. It's that they're being asked to wear the mask. Another lesson I learned, put your values in your back pocket. So when I meet someone and I realize, okay, so what we're dealing with, we're dealing with someone who's holding more extreme views, someone who might be on the path to radicalization. What's most important right now? For me to be right or for this man to be heard? So I put my values and beliefs in my back pocket. So I don't lose them, but I don't lead with them. And then I really just let the man be heard and validate where I can. So he feels witnessed and seen in the equation. I never define masculinity. Who am I to define what that is? So I don't talk about healthy masculinity. But what I do say is, I'm not going to tell you what it is, but you best believe I'm going to ask you the questions under your protective layers so you can realize what it is for you and really allowing each man to define it for himself. I really listen for and speak to men's yearning. And I often say that grounded neutrality is the superpower. When I can be grounded in a way that my beliefs don't influence how I do this work, but I can really hold men in their wholeness or help them see their wholeness. And it's about planting seeds. Not having the big grandiose gestures of transformation, but just presence, stillness, and a willingness to listen to another man. And most men know how to perform strength. Few men have been invited and initiated into strength rooted in love. The sacred masculine expresses itself through presence, power without force, where your nervous system regulates the room. Often when I'm training facilitators, I'll say the room is with you in the first 30 seconds and has nothing to do with the words you say. It's all about the presence and energy that you bring, because people can feel it. Compassion with a backbone, the open-hearted warrior. Where your compassion is open and unshakable. Soft heart with a strong spine to be able to defend what's sacred. And boundaries with love. A boundary is not a wall. A boundary is a commitment you make to yourself in the presence of another. And ways we can do this is slow our body. Breath before strategy. Lead with curiosity, not correctness. Hold your center. Presence is often the strongest force in the room. You can sit in silence, and your presence can speak louder than any of your words. So when I lived in DC, I created something just to also support my own breaking out of loneliness, something called Men's Soul Adventures DC, where outdoor adventure meets deeper male bonding, meets soul connecting conversations. Basically hikes and rafting and different adventures. So I didn't know how many guys would show up. Within 24 hours, 52 men signed up. Within 3 months, we had 180 men. I went to 4 other cities. Within 3 days, we went from 180 to 330 men. So then I got smart and I said, okay, why? Why are you coming to a soul adventure? A third of them said, I wanted a different type of adventure. I wanted a different kind of adventure, and this looked interesting. A third of them said, I wanted deeper connection with men beyond the superficial. But a third of them said, I just have practical questions around spirituality and faith, and I have no place to go, and I don't want to go to a church. And so, with that, I started calling it practical spirituality for dudes. And as part of that, I would bring in, my second master's was in existential psychotherapy. So I would bring in the existential questions. Who am I? Why am I here? What am I here to do? And how do I love? So, who am I? Why am I here? What am I here to do? And how do I love? I believe these questions can be a doorway into an inner knowing. So I want to take it now to the systems level. So I'm often asking the question, how do we engage the hardest to reach men and the hardest to access systems? And for me, that's police, first responders, military, energy sector, construction, and tech. There's many others, essential infrastructure. But often these are systems where performance is rewarded, service is expected, emotion is punished or diminished. So I know many of you have heard many of the statistics out there on the state of men. I have a few that you might not have heard. When we look at men in the workplace, 63% of men report feeling emotionally disconnected at work. 63. Disengaged employees cost the US companies $50 billion annually. Only 36% of men feel included in DEI efforts. When a man doesn't feel included, DEI can become polarizing. 55% of workplace misconduct cases involve men in power. Toxic culture is 10.4 times more predictive of attrition than compensation. Male leaders are 2% more likely to avoid seeking help for mental health challenges. And 25% of men report having no close friends. So men aren't disengaging because they're resistant. They're often disengaging because they're in pain and don't know where to put it. And when I enter a company, I don't start with ideology. I start with humanity. Men don't need a program, they need permission. So I was recently doing a corporate men's circle for an energy company in New York. Did 5 circle sessions, talking about the state of men, expectations of men. How does this impact job performance? How do you look at purpose and mission? How do you redefine success? And at the end, the overwhelming response was, thank you for giving us permission to talk about things we never knew we had permission to talk about. Then I realized when men start healing, systems can start shifting. So when I think about people that can do this work with me, I often say it's the stomach, the will, the skill, and the cred. The stomach. Who has the stomach and the ability to work across ideological difference without flinching? The will. Are you here to help heal men, transform them, support them, or do you want to fix them? If you want to fix them, this isn't the place. Do you love them or do you have contempt for them? The skill. 4 prongs. So 1, dude psychology. So not the pathologizing kind, but like what is universal across men? What's the male psyche? Individual transformation, group process, and an understanding of system design and change and how they all fit together. And then the cred. Can you work across ideological difference? I mean, can you stand in front of these men and be taken seriously? Kind of how I see it. So where is this work going now? So what I'm up to now is putting together, in addition to the work in organizations, putting together a statewide initiative and coalition in Pennsylvania, working with the Governor's Office of Homeland Security, different agencies around extremist prevention, engagement, bridge building, and then bringing the piece in around how do we engage men across 9 pilot cities across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. To really see, because Pennsylvania has the 3rd highest rate of hate activity in the country, after California and Florida, then Pennsylvania, then Texas, then Georgia. Huh? And the third highest rate of hate groups, hate activity in the country. Hate groups. So according to the Southern Poverty Law Center. So it's an opportunity. And a lot of the work is being done in Pennsylvania that could then serve as a model for the nation. We're also creating something called, in our work with police, we've just partnered with the King Center in Atlanta to bring Dr. King's nonviolence principles into the work with police. We're also creating something called Hidden Warriors for LGBTQ men who have served in police, military, veterans, first responders, intelligence, defense. And from circles to systems, bringing folks along, blending men's work with organization development work to do systems work, and helping men's work leaders learn how to bring systems from programs into systems level impact. And as you can see, there's a number of ways that when you play at the systems level, not the program level, ways you can start to see new ways of thinking about the work. So in close, I'd like each of you to just place your hand on your heart. Feel the rhythm. That's the pulse of the warrior within. He is not asking you to fight. He is asking you to love fiercely, to turn your shield into a bridge, to protect humanity, not ego, to bring compassion where others bring fear. The world does not need armored men. It needs more awakened warriors, not men who dominate, men who heal. Not warriors of war, warriors of compassion. The question is not, do you have warrior energy? You already do. The question is, how awake is it? May your fire be sturdy. May your strength be guided by compassion. May your courage build bridges where others build walls. The world isn't waiting for perfect men. It's waiting for awakened warriors, and the world needs us now. Thank you.
I'm really glad that we get to hear more of Sean as this weekend unfolds. And also, you can read more of Sean in his book, Warrior Compassion, which is on a table at the bottom of the stairs that you go up to the dining hall. And there are some copies left there. And from my compassionate warrior heart, I strongly urge you to ensure that none of those copies are left there by the end of this weekend. Sean did not pay me to make that announcement. Okay. I was going to tell you a story. I'm actually not going to tell you that for the video guys. You can record. I'll tell this story later, and I'll check in with you later. There's a story I'll tell you at some point that I just want to share in the context of this room, but I'm not going to do it now. I will do this instead. Some of you have heard that there's a beautiful teaching regarding the idea that in the Hebrew Bible, you're not supposed to say the name of God. Some of you have heard this teaching, and that teaching may have been misinterpreted, as a lot of religious teachings and presumably in all religious traditions have been misinterpreted, to say, if you say the word that is, I think transliterated would be the word in English as Yahweh, that if you say that word, you're in trouble, right? And I heard this from Father Richard, who heard it from a rabbi, that's not what the teaching means. It does not mean do not say the word that is formed on your lips when you say Yahweh. What it means more is, don't let your desire for religious or ideological perfection prevent you from experiencing God. And part of the teaching goes deeper than that and suggests that if you were to make a sound with your breath as you inhale and exhale, I know most of you have heard this before, but it's good to hear it. Again, if you were to make a sound as you breathe in and breathe out, the sound might sound like I think it's a beautiful poetic idea, because it suggests to me kind of like the opposite of you can't say the name of God. It's you can't not say the name of God, but you can get so into God talk and ideology talk that you miss the spirit of it. It's quite possible that literally the very first thing you did when you came out of the womb, and the very last thing you will do before you go back and forward into whatever it is happens next, was to say the name of God. And that this is available to us every second of our lives. So I want to invite you to slow down your breathing, not in a forced way, but a rhythmic way. And for a few breaths, if it calls to you and if it's life-giving, let your breath make that sound. And imagine that you're not conjuring up God or cosmic love, whatever words work for you. You're not conjuring this up. This is what already is. This is what we are born into. I invite you now to close your eyes, if you will, and keep breathing. And if the sound works for you, keep making the sound, because I want to remind you that the first time you died, you had been alive forever. You didn't know this at the time, but you had been living in a cave surrounded by water so perfectly warm, it was always fine to swim in, and so perfectly balanced, you could even breathe this water. It was a lovely cave. Before the day came, you'd been in the cave for as long as you could remember. In fact, from the perspective you now inhabit, I'm not sure remember is the right word for the way you thought about the world, because there was no past or future in this cave. You were just hanging out in the cave, being cradled, periodically bouncing or kicking a little, but for the most part, you were sucking your thumb and ruling the universe. You were a benign ruler, of course. There was no concept of conflict or harm in your mind. No Machiavellian textbooks on how to be a bad baby found their way into the library of the particular womb you were enjoying. Innocence was not just all you knew, but all you could conceive. And then an earthquake. The water you were breathing suddenly dispersed beneath you, a rushing, silent whoosh being the last thing you didn't hear before you were squeezed down a tunnel that got narrower as you neared its exit. You didn't understand then what suffocating was, but you could certainly describe it now. Your lungs coming under immediate and brutal pressure to exchange the amniotic fluid they had been breathing for the past 9 months for the oxygen they would receive for the next whatever number of years. At the time, you didn't know what a lung was, never mind a year. But both were ready for you, entirely secure in their identity as lungs and years. You would have a breathing apparatus and time to use it. But you didn't need to think about that now. You were too busy being sent through the tunnel of doom, the walls collapsing inward like the Star Wars trash compactor, the gunk of your prior eternity left behind, nothing to hold on to, an unstoppable roller coaster that apparently could only end with your destruction. You'd had a good ride, I suppose. A whole life consisting of nothing but having your needs met and sleeping. So complaining would have been churlish. Still, you were probably a wee bit irritated. Maybe you had just gotten used to the cave, but now you were dying, unable to breathe, accelerating in anxiety toward who knows what. This happened to me too. We have a lot in common. In the end, your first death and our first death was quick. A few mighty thrusts on the part of the cave builder, and we were expelled like a bank's pneumatic money tube out into piercing light, revealing no warmth to our infant eyes. For some of us, it was even more dramatic. The roof of the cave was suddenly torn open, and giant hands reached in to pull us out. A being the size of Godzilla picked us up, slapped us on our backsides, and with a pair of scissors almost as big as we were, cut the cord that connected us all to all we had ever known. It was cold and dry and lonely, and we were surrounded by giants. You bet we cried. But if you were to slow down that cry and use really sophisticated audiology equipment and replay the sound of the crying, what might that sound be? The body you are in today is the body that was in that cave. So may you meet your body with openness, an evolving map charting new territory, and welcome the places that have been humiliated, exiled, or concealed. Toes oversized or bent, shins scarred, knees echoing metallic, thighs a landscape, groin a center of pleasure and confusion, belly where you rest your hands or the head of a loved one finds reassurance, chest stage directing you forward or in retreat, shoulders on which you carry tools and the weight of the world, neck which may be garlanded with elitist honor, or standardized dog tags. Face which you have never truly seen, but which wants to see you. Skull, the hardest part of you. Brain, the softest, most pliable. The body is not the totality of you, but your body is a total part of the complete you, and it deserves sacred regard. Your body is a member of you. So may your hands become expert in admiring what they touch, and your eyes master the transfiguration of contempt into veneration. May the genitals that have been a location for unease, shame, or objectification be healed into a calm foundation of presence, an anchoring in the knowledge that sensation is not sacrilege, that desire is a gift, that the body is not meant to be a theater of war or a front line, but a palace for the pleasure and the work of being alive. May the bad dreams that have become stuck in your marrow come to know that they too can find their place, unembellished by drama, undenied by shame, brought into the light of a braver space whose borders you curate through a marriage of audacity and compassion. May you be witnessed by those who know the adventure of such tenacity and tenderness, unshockable by your story, who will meet your sorrow with esteem. May you hear all the words of acceptance your body needs, and more than that, may you enter into the silence of knowing your body has the same inestimable value as every other body, and it belongs here as much as the mighty oak. May you see mountains as mirrors for your body's capacity to be gazed upon with wonder. May rivers and oceans remind you of the fluency of how you may dance with reality. May you feel the earth as your floor and reach to the sky as your roof. And between mountains and oceans, river and sky, earth and sky, may you boldly call forth the pleasure of being, not as furtive or trivial, but as an incarnation of your presence in the world. Touching your body, showing yourself to yourself, embracing the fleshiness of you, flawed and lovely, strong and vulnerable, aging and renewing. Step decisively out from under a perpetual stream of self-blame and the pressure to deflate. Instead, may you jump into an ocean of shimmering regard in which your body, your injured, scratched, beautifully blemished body, is rightly validated to be of ineffable worth. May you know your right size, the push and pull, impact, and needs of the space you must take up, and in becoming your fullest self, no more and no less. And may the story your body tells show others the magnificence they inhabit too. Dan is going to share something about the vision of and for Illuman. Organizations, movements, and communities often need to be renewed and sometimes even reborn. I don't know what is happening on the inside of Illuman, but if a rebirth needs to happen or a renewal needs to happen, it's good to check in about these things and discern what parts need to die, what parts need to arise that are maybe new, what parts need to be dusted off and polished again. And sometimes the process of change and renewal can feel like a kind of death. And sometimes being the chair of the board of a nonprofit organization can feel like a kind of death. And so I invite you to bless this man who has stewarded so much in this role, and listen and discern together about what might be next. So this is Dan.
Well, good morning, brothers. I wanted to begin, first of all, by thanking Sean and our dear poet who has come to speak to us with such beautiful language. And to introduce Chris Cleghorn. Chris, would you stand up? If we had created a template of what we wanted and needed in the next chair of Illuman, it would have looked really, really like Chris. Yeah, amen. Chris brings amazing experience from many nonprofits that he has led. Chris and I first met on the way to an EROP. We were in a much too small car together for several hours there and back. And since then, we have worked very closely together. So, Chris, thank you for stepping up. Thank you. So, brothers, this is not a vision from on high. It is a conversation that I want to open with all of you and with our brothers throughout Illuman about a vision for us in this time. So in my faith community, there is a Jamaican woman who wears bright colors and floral hats. She's a woman of great faith. She's been through a lot. And for some reason, we have this little mystical connection that helps us transcend our different understandings of politics. So we always greet each other warmly and have a little chat. And on 2 different Sundays recently, she's looked me right in the eyes and said, "Dan, this is your moment. You have to step up." Well, what I know about Audrey is that she knows I'm very involved in Illumin and that she has a 23-year-old son that she worries about. Now, on the surface, he's doing fine. He has a degree, he's got a job, he seems to have friends, but she knows he's adrift. She knows that he lacks the grounding of elders in his life. So what I hear the Spirit saying through Audrey is, brothers, this is our moment, and we have to step up. So what does that mean? What might that look like? Well, what I see is that more than ever, the gifts that Illumin has, what it is we know how to do well, really connects with the deep needs of the world. So we are in the midst of the great unraveling. Some people see it as a polycrisis, a web of crises that connect to each other. And at the center of this web is the crisis in men. And Sean has spoken eloquently about that. And I think all of you don't need reminding of the statistics. But we know personally, and we know from our reading, that there are many men who crave authentic connection, who are lonely, who are hurting, who are carrying burdens of pain they don't know what to do with. And these men are often hiding their pain, courageously, perhaps, behind stoic facades, and they're transmitting that pain to the people around them. And sometimes their pain is such that they are part of the great unraveling themselves. That is to say, they are angry, they are reactive, they are contributing to this really aggressive vibe in our society. So Illumin has the gifts to speak to to include, to heal many of these men. So over 30 years, and we're celebrating 30 years of the rites of passage in 2026. So over 30 years, we have initiated many men, and as a result, we have a whole body of elders. And it's cool being an elder, you know, being all wise and shit like that. And so the question is, well, so what? So you're fucking wise. So what? So, you know, what we need is generative elders, life-giving elders, those of us who are willing to step outside our comfort zones and to say, what are we called to do? What is truly ours to do? Well, obviously, in a council, we can listen to the disconnected. We know how to create sacred space. We know how to lead men into liminal space where they can encounter the power greater than ourselves, to begin to be healed and transformed, and to feel safe, to feel that there are men holding them in the liminal space who will then help them on the ascent, to rise out as a renewed man, as a renewed being. So I think the great unraveling challenges us to think with, or to see with new eyes, what is ours to do? What is ours to do in this time? So I invite you for the moment to let go of all the reasons why we can't do this, right? To let go of all of our constraints, which are real, and to have an abundance mentality, to think, well, what if? What if? So my proposition is maybe we're not too small, but our vision is too small, right? And Sean put it very eloquently. When men are healed, when men begin to discover meaning and purpose in their lives, it can radiate out to change whole systems, right? So there are two examples of, I think, stepping up to be bold in this time. We're creating a new strategic plan in which we're saying that we want, within 3 years, we want to engage at a meaningful way with 5,000 men every year. That's 4 times more than we could claim to be touching now. And secondly, we want to be nationally regarded as voices who know something about healthy masculinity and manhood. Right now, we're virtually unknown. We've been flying under the radar for most of 30 years, right? Outside of the CAC and Richard Rohr readers. So there is a moment as part of our stepping up to step into that national conversation. So the conversation is becoming more compassionate, in part because there's a wide recognition now that shaming and blaming and denigrating men really just for being men, silencing their voices. As Sean said, many men in a conversation on DEI just shut up. They just don't say anything. And if they're called on, they go, oh, what's the right answer here, right? So there is this recognition now that has not made better men. To the contrary, there is a horrible backlash that is leading many men into resentment and anger, dark corners of the manosphere, misogyny. So there is a need for people who actually know something about men and healthy masculinities, plural, to enter this conversation. Might that be us? I think so. Yeah. I don't know what our medium is. I don't know how we do that yet. But we know stuff. And we have something to say about not fixing men, but liberating men from shame, from anger, from fear, from the pain that often drives them to be very, the kind of men that are held out as some sort of toxic stereotype. We know how to speak into this, and it's something that we need to step up to do. Now, the other thing that I want to say is that as small as we are, we have two superpowers that we may not really understand. And one of those is radical belonging, which we are really sort of reimagining now. And what radical belonging says is that I commit to be in relationship and stay in relationship with another man who triggers me, right? Another man who's very different from me. I can tell you, over my 2 years as chair, I have triggered men and men have triggered me. That comes with the job, Chris. You probably knew that, but, buckle up. And so I have felt that it's on me to try to see, can this radical belonging thing actually work? And I'll tell you, it's really, really hard. The sort of typical response in Illuman to conflict is that if you pour lots of lover magician energy on it and that doesn't fix it, somebody leaves and both sides are hurt. And we can't keep doing that. So I've said, okay, I got to do this. And what I have found is that either one-on-one or with an elder as our facilitator, in working through what it is that triggers me, I have to understand what is it in me that is being triggered? What is it in me that needs some work? And then to be willing to just hear this other man, to be able to let him hear me, to be honest, right? And for us really to move beyond our stereotypes. So there are a number of men with whom I've done this. They still piss me off sometimes, I still, I'm jarred by some of their language. But I'm no longer looking at that man through a stereotype. I am seeing this beautiful, beloved Son of God and a brother. And so I can sort of take a deep breath. Okay, that is characteristic of that man. That's his language. I can be okay with that because I see beyond the stereotype that language calls up for me and see that our hearts can be in one. And the issue that we're discussing is that's just an issue. We can do this, right? So radical belonging is truly hard. And if we can do it, it will change us and we will bear witness to a society where many men, many people are so tired of the division and the polarization. It's a society in which we are increasingly defined by who and what we hate instead of who and what we love. And so if we can find a way and model a way, I think it will be huge. Now, also, to be perfectly blunt, we are never going to quadruple the number of men in Illuman if we keep fishing out of the same pond, So we are overwhelmingly white, middle and upper middle class men, second half of life, with a progressive skew. So for us to quadruple the number of men, we'll need to open our arms to first half of life men, which we can do. We will need to ask ourselves, we have really good intentions about inviting men of color, but what do they need? How do they understand a genuine welcome? What do we need to do for our LGBTQ brothers to feel safe in Illuman, right? And this is probably going to be the hardest. How are we going to sit in council with men with intense warrior energy, right? The kind of men that Sean works with, policemen, first responders, vets, people who are really turned off by progressive language. So how are we going to be able to speak our truth into the world in language that doesn't alienate half the men in America? Yeah? So it doesn't mean, I'm not asking anyone to be less committed to social justice or less committed to any of the many things that we believe are important. But can we just find language that would at least enable us to sit in council with a warrior, someone maybe who has a very different view of the world, and ask, brother, tell me what your life experience has taught you about life to this point. And to listen to that without judging. Just listen and to feel the heart there. And then for us to be honest in sharing our hearts, right? I was never in the military, certainly never a first responder, but in my interactions with military folks and police, what I found is they have really, really keen bullshit detectors. And if you want to have any kind of conversation or relationship, they need to figure out pretty quickly that you're the real deal. You know, whoever you are, right? Progressive or not, but if you are an authentic man who is willing to accept them and their authenticity, okay, you've got a place to start. And sometimes for somebody, again, who has no military background, I've been surprised at the friendships that I've been able to make with men, active duty or veterans. So this is going to be important for us. Now, so quickly, if you're really drawn to this notion, this challenge of radical belonging, please see Eris. Would you stand up? Okay. If first half of life men are important, Randy, would you stand up? Right. And then Melchior and Matt are here, and we will be doing where are you guys? I hope they showed up. There, in the back there. There's also a workshop, but feel free to have conversation with them. One last point on first half of life men, they're showing up, right? Even though we're not really reaching out. And so I've sort of asked, and anecdotally, I'm hearing 3 reasons why young men are coming to us. One is, Illumin is one of the rare places to do where intergenerational gatherings of men can do life together, and where older men can listen from the heart without judging or fixing to what's going on in the lives of first half of life men and boys. Secondly, there are a lot of young men, and I think Sean or Gareth mentioned this, they are looking to deepen their spirituality, and they don't think organized religion is the place where they're going to find what they're looking for. And so they're checking us out, right? What is the spirituality in Illumin? And can you help me on my spiritual journey? The answer is yeah. The journey of illumination is a spiritual journey. And third, there are young men who show up more and more, actually, showing up at MROPs. Well, why? We created this for second half of life men, right? And so I know 2 awesome men in their 30s, mid-30s now, who did their rites when they were like early 20s. And so in the conversation, it comes down to this. They had been wounded in their youth and boyhood. They were trying to make sense out of life, and they didn't want to wait 20 years until we invited them to come and be initiated, right? Okay? So let's just open our arms, because they need us, but we need them, right? We have chapters dying on the vine. We need this energy. We need this joy that comes from being in an intergenerational council with younger men. So finally, and this is where I'm sort of having to let go of my script, and I'll be curious what it is I'm going to say. Because our real superpower is our spirituality. And in Illumin, our spirituality is more a set of practices and understandings than it is anything that we have defined or even described. So what I think, though, is that those of us who have done the rites of passage know from our own experience and from what we see, if we go back as initiated men to help in rites of passage, is that what we do and do well is use ritual, nature, silence, story to create a sacred space and to create a trust that initiates are held by trustworthy men, and so that they will enter in the journey of descent into liminal space where they encounter the power greater than ourselves. And that's where the healing and the transformation begins. So we are not the ones who do the transformation. We make the invitation, we set the scene, we create the kind of trust that enables men to let go a little bit from the head and move into the heart, and to be willing to express their grief and to know that it's okay, that whatever they can scream, they can cry, they can do whatever. In this journey of descent, we are holding them. And then we know how to lead men in the journey of ascent into the renewing, right? It's not a one and done. We all know that from our own experience. So we are inviting them into the journey of illumination, where this work continues, right? In community with their brothers. So this is really, I think, the analogy too for our current moment. We are in the great unraveling. We are in a liminal space, which many of us find pretty terrifying. And I really am trying to stay engaged, and there are days when, despite all my best efforts, something happens that penetrates my shield, and I feel really down. I feel really down. And then I have to struggle to come back up, to renew my faith that this is not about me, right? And it's not about what I can do. It's about me doing my part, whatever that is. So, brothers, Illumin has the gifts that so many men need that can start to transform the crisis in men, which will radiate out. And so the question, I think, for us is, will we be observers and victims of the great unraveling, or will we enter into liminal space in our society knowing that there can be a great renewing and that we're going to be part of that great renewing by bringing the gifts that we have to 4 times more men than we are touching right now, by speaking into the national conversation with the wisdom and the knowledge and the compassion that we have for men. So our spirituality is right at the center of that, because we know we are not the ones who transform and heal men in rites of passage. We are agents, we are catalysts, we are instruments. What we do is really important, but we're not the ones who do it. And I think if we can enter as individuals and as Illumin into this darkness, then recognizing that even though we can't say what's going to happen, we're not in control of outcomes, but we're in control of what we do. Some years ago at an Awaken, I had one of these moments, and what I heard the Lord say was, enter with joy into the darkness, knowing that only my hand can save you. I believe we can enter into the darkness with all of our gifts, with our passion, with our joy, and rest in knowing that the power beyond ourselves, the Holy One beyond all names, will save us. Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Gareth. What I hear is that we have work to do, but it starts with the work inside of us to become the kind of men that awaken to this task and to this calling, to let the wind of the Spirit blow through us. There's a lot coming up. I want to just kind of walk you through the day, as well as a few other details you need to know.